Revolutionary greetings, comrades. We've always said that migration is now used as a key electoral message or a campaigning tool that some political parties are using to try and win votes. We have seen the rise of right-wing formations while using migration as a key political tool. In South Africa, we're headed to 2024 elections. And some are of the view that those who do not handle migration well or who are not anti-migrant are going to share the votes. And some, of course, are saying the loss by the ANC in key metros is because of the manner in which it handles migration question. We've discussed the policy conference of the ANC and saw how it proposes to deal with the question of migration. There's also talk of introducing a quota system as a way of also trying to manage these issues of migration and the migrant labor, as it were. But in this video, I want to start a series where we look into Europe, how Europe dealt with the question of migration or is dealing with the question of migration, and see if indeed right-wing political formations are winning votes based on the question of migration. We will start with Germany. We know that Germany in 2015 received so many migrants or refugees from Syria, from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, that crossed to Germany, while other countries were refusing to accept refugees. Germany did open its borders to refugees. Then Chancellor Angela Merkel adopted a progressive stance, we might say, on the question of refugees or in how to deal with the refugees. And many refugees, close to 1 million, were accommodated. And then in 2021, an election was held. Of course, then Chancellor Angela Merkel had done her term. I think she spent about 16 years as the Chancellor in Germany. So she was stepping down. Of course, her party lost. But we want to then analyze whether the party particularly that won, its attitude to refugees or to migration at the time in the build-up to elections. And also then look at those that were right-wing or are right-wing, which were anti-migrants or anti-refugees, in how they performed in the elections. So the party that Angela Merkel led or was leading lost the elections. She was the leader of the Conservatives, CDU. Of course, you know our attitudes as communists to conservatives. Her party lost about 50 seats, and which reduced to winning 24.1% of the vote, which was 196 votes. The party that won, or the coalition that won, because it was the party that won, and of course to get into coalition with others to form a government, the SPD, which is defined by some as center-left to some as a left-leaning Social Democratic Party, it gained 53 seats in the elections, winning 25.7% of the vote. The AFD, which was anti-migrant, anti-refugees, lost 11 seats from the previous elections. Instead of gaining because of its anti-migrant stance, it lost 11 seats, coming up in with 11.5% of the vote, winning 83 seats. But let's then look into their attitude to migration, where to pull an article which was written, I think in 2015, because in 2015, this was the hot topic in Germany. So we want to understand what those parties were thinking, or what was their attitude to migration, which then played itself out until the election. The debate continued until the election. So the first party that we're looking into, which was the right-wing political formation, which has been anti-migrant or anti-refugees, the Alternative for Germany, AFD. On the question of upper limit for asylum seekers, it says here, I quote, it was written in 2015, remember, the far-right populist Alternative for Germany wants to go beyond an annual upper limit on asylum seekers. It wants a zero immigration policy, a cap on all immigration unless deportations of rejected asylum seekers result in a net immigration of 0 or lower. They also want to close the German border to stop what they view as unregulated mass migration, close quote. There are some political formations in South Africa that even go to the extent, or social movements that go to the extent of saying South Africa must close its borders if it has to deal with the question of migration. Then on the question of family reunifications, it said the AFD is against all types of family reunifications, regardless of protection status. That was its position. Then on deportations in 2015, it says the AFD seeks to radically increase the number of deportations of rejected asylum seekers, as well as reform the current asylum law laid out in the German constitution to ensure a smaller number of people are granted asylum. On the immigration law, on the question of the immigration law, it said that it can determine that the state itself can determine quality and the quantity of migration to be key characteristics of state sovereignty. Is one of the few statements the ADF makes on how legal migration could be regulated in its party program, focusing large on what it perceives are faults in the current migration system. Many AFD members view migrants from Muslim-majority countries, and Africa in particular, as a potential threat to the security or stability of Germany. And some, of course, in South Africa, view migrants as such as a security threat or stability to South Africa. And we said, remember, that this party then lost 11 seats in the 2021 elections, where right-wingers across the globe, and of course in South Africa, thought that it was going to do much better because of its stance on migrants, refugees, asylum seekers. It lost 11 seats and scored 11.5%. Let's look into the party that the former chancellor was leading, which narrowly lost the elections. The Christian Democratic Union, SDU. It was an alliance with the Christian Social Union, is the CSU. On the question of upper limit for asylum seekers, I quote, Chancellor Angela Merkel's conservative Christian Democratic Party opposes an upper limit for how many refugees can enter Germany each year, though its Bavarian sister party, that is the Christian Social Union, has endorsed a limit of 200,000 new asylum seekers per year. The joint party election program of SDU and the CSU does not mention such a limit. Right? You heard what we said about the AFD. Then the CDU on family reunifications says, while the party election program of the CSU does not comment on refugee family reunifications, some party members would reportedly like to limit the number of refugees relatives that may come to Germany each year. People who have been granted refugee status can currently apply for close family members to join them in Germany. This applies to their spouses, their children, including minors, and their caretaker, and the older unmarried children, as well as their parents. The current CDU, CSU, and SPD-led coalition government has put family reunification for those who receive subsidiary protection, the permission to remain in Germany as a non-refugee or asylum recipient due to the threat of serious harm at home, on hold until March 2018. Remember, I'm quoting from the 2015 article. While Interior Minister Thomas de Maizière of the CDU wants to extend this moratorium, Chancellor Merkel said she would make a decision on the issue after the election. Right, on deportations, on the question of deportations, the SDU, CSU wants to increase deportations of rejected asylum seekers and tighten the rules for rejected asylum seekers, for example, by extending a pre-deportation custody of up to 10 days. The question whether conflict-ridden Afghanistan can be considered safe enough to deport people back to has been fiercely debated. The CDU-SU believes that some regions of Afghanistan are safe to deport to. Then on the question of immigration law, the CSU-CDU wants a skilled workers immigration law that requires migrants to find a job in Germany ahead of getting their visa to prove that they can cover their living expenses while in Germany. Let's then look into the last political party. There are a number of political parties in Germany that contested elections, but let's look into the last part, which then won the elections, because the CDU and its alliance partner, it lost 50 seats, coming in at 24.1%. That is translates to 196 seats that it won. So let's look into the SDP, the Social Democratic Party, SPD, which then won the elections, and the current chancellor is a member of the party. On the question of upper limit for asylum seekers, the SPD is against limiting the number of asylum seekers allowed to enter Germany or the EU. What would we do with the first refugee to reach the European border once the quota is reached? That was the question posed. Would we send them back to certain death? As long as this question hasn't been answered, a debate about an upper limit does not make sense. That was said by the SPD leader Martin Schulz, who told the German Daily News. Then on the question of family reunifications, the SPD wants to end the moratorium on family reunifications for subsidiary protection recipients. Then on the question of deportations, in its party program, the SPD says it wants to increase voluntary returns of rejected asylum seekers and to enforce deportations more thoroughly. It also wants to enable rejected asylum applicants who have been law-abiding residents in Germany for 2 years and who are currently employed or in school to stay in the country legally. They are against deportations to Afghanistan. Then on the question of the immigration law, the party said the SPD wants to introduce a new immigration law similar to the Canadian immigration system. Criteria such as degrees, job experience, language skills, and the like would be taken into consideration to decide on who gets to migrate to Germany. They are for a flexible quota that determines how many people get to come to Germany each year based on the current job market situation. The party code says if you want to stem illegal migration, we have to create legal ways to immigrate, said the SPD in its program. So we're not going to look into Green Party on the same questions that we've dealt with or responded by the three major parties, nor are we going to look into the Left Party, the Free Democratic Party, and others will not do that. But we wanted to look into these three. That the question of migration in Germany, while it was hotly debated ahead of the 2021 elections, the right-wing parties actually lost the election. They actually had to share the voters because a populist view, in most cases, does not win an election because when it's fine when people talk in the manner in which they are talking in the media, on social media, and so on, matches being carried out, but that does not normally translate into an election, as demonstrated by the elections in Germany. So this question was hotly discussed in Germany or debated, but those that were anti-migrant or anti-refugee did not necessarily win the election. In fact, they did not win the election. They did not increase their seats in their parliament. So it does not necessarily mean that political parties that are anti-migrants are going to win seats or are going to increase their numbers in the 2024 elections in South Africa. Donald Trump came in. Anti-migrants wanted to build a wall between Mexico and the United States of America. We know that he then lost the election because Americans had to soap up, say, no. Well, we might, of course, on the international issues, we might then have a different view on Donald Trump. Will at some point maybe discuss that, and we accept that if Donald Trump was president of the United States, NATO was not going to be involved in the war in Ukraine, as is the case. But that's a debate for another day. But the Americans realized that no, we can't have Donald Trump as president given his attitude to migration or to immigrants. As I conclude, there are many who think that the question of migration will determine who will form the next government in South Africa in 2024. Some are already saying that the coalition of the opposition, which is political parties which are anti-migrant, will then emerge or will push the ANC down to less than 50%, and then a coalition of opposition parties will then emerge and form the next government because of their anti-migrant sentiments. It might not necessarily be true. So we thought we needed to use Germany as an example. We are going to look into France as well, because it's important that we study Western Europe on the question of migration, because it is a topical question that we cannot avoid. Please share your views, comrades, on your understanding on how Western Europe dealt with the question of migration, and what are the lessons that we can learn, particularly in Southern Africa, more specifically in South Africa, because migration, we've said, is one way down to South Africa. We've been talking about Namibia, Botswana. We've spoken about East Africa, how it manages migration. Please share your views right in the comment section. Please circulate this video to your contacts, and please kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel. Otherwise, Amandla, comrades.